Did you know you can support the Technology Show when you shop at Amazon.com? Become a friend of the show by starting your shopping at thetechnologyshow.com/shop. It's Tuesday, March 11th, 2014, and live from Rural Pickens, South Carolina, sunny Rural Pickens, South Carolina, I'm Matthew TG.
I'm Heath Mulliken.
And I'm Tony Casey. Welcome to the Technology Show, a weekly podcast featuring technology, theology, and everything in between. This is episode 239.
Yay.
I'm still getting used to the new music.
Yeah.
It's a completely different rhythm.
I feel like we're doing aerobics, like every Tuesday.
Yes.
Okay, get
but
the cardiovascular.
We probably need to. Hey, a lot of great things going on today. First of all, do I need to wait for the...
First, we gotta get the music.
I feel like... Oh, never mind. Okay, so... We want to first announce this great giveaway. Several weeks ago, we had Jason Butler on, pastor of Transformation City in Milwaukee,
Wisconsin. Yes.
Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This book, Dangerous Faith, it will wreck you. It was powerful. And this book is going to go to our good friend, Ray Selden. So, Ray, if you're listening, we'll be in contact with you. And this book, this actual copy right here, Tony's going to sign it.
His hands have touched it. And can I say real quick, I said in the pre-show, we have had as much response from that episode as any episode that we have done.
Yep.
And if you didn't get a chance to listen to that interview, it is powerful.
Don't listen to it right now. Wait. So we have a great guest today. And so when we have a great guest, a great author, guess what? We have a great giveaway. And so we're giving away a copy of Sticky Faith by Cara, Powell. And you can go to right there. Technology/giveaway, or there's a dot in there. I always mess that up. Or the technologyshow.com/giveaway. And enter to win as often as you like, just like Publishers Clearinghouse, only we actually have a real winner. So Sticky Faith by Cara Powell. Tony will tell you as we get into this interview, this is a powerful book. If you're in ministry or a parent, I'm excited to get into that. So, TG, tell them what else they can do to help us out.
Okay, well, it's to me. So we love your help in regards to funding the show by using Amazon.com. If you go to thetechnologyshow.com/shop or to our website, you'll see a little Amazon banner there somewhere. You click that, it takes you to Amazon. If you use Amazon, anything you buy there, we get a cut of it when you go through our website to do it. It helps us out. In fact, we've made a couple studio upgrades. I'm actually wearing a couple on my ear right here for the first time. That's a change, and this is because of you all shopping at Amazon. That's right. That we're able to do these kinds of things. So it's a big help to us. Head on over there. Purchase of the week this week. We've talked about it before, but somebody bought another one. It's a pillow speaker for use in bed. So it'll be in our show notes. And if you want one,
this goes underneath the pillow, I guess.
Yeah.
And
so you don't wear headphones.
Okay.
You know, have you ever tried to wear headphones?
Yeah.
It's very annoying. Unless you like to lay on your back. So this pillow speaker, you slide it under your pillow, and you can listen to your music and podcasts.
I got it.
Let me say real quick. Let's say that you're not in the mood to buy anything on Amazon today. Well, I would encourage you, go through our link, sign up for Amazon Prime. What this does, a free 30-day trial. Costs you nothing. You sign up through Amazon Prime. You get free shipping on all your orders. You get thousands and thousands of free streaming movies and TV show. I watched the entire series of The West Wing. That took about 2 months that I didn't leave the house. But again, just go through our link. Go to sign up for Prime. It's only $79.95 a year. We all three use it.
Yeah.
It pays for itself if you do a lot of shopping. And if you sign up for that free thing, no obligation for you. Sign up for this free thing, and it helps the show out tremendously.
Many of you know that over this 2014, we've had every other episode, which is sponsored by Wesley Seminary. And we just want to let you know that if you're looking for an effective way to get word out about your organization, business, or nonprofit, why not consider sponsoring an episode of the Technology Show? We had the conversation last week that we have episodes that are 2.5 years old. People are still watching. We still get comments on them. And so if you or your organization had sponsored that episode, your ad literally lives on for years. So consider going to thetechnologyshow.com/sponsor. And one of the episodes that we're really looking forward to next month is one from the Trash Mountain Project. Watch this promo video with us.
When Brett, Jael, and Michael returned from Tegucigalpa in Honduras, they went on a trip with an orphanage ministry. And when they got back, it was pretty apparent that something was different, that they had seen something that really struck to their hearts.
We just went home and started praying because we didn't have any idea what that meant for us as a family and for us as a couple. And there was such a sharp contrast in what we saw there and the life we were living back home and the ministry that we had, and versus meeting the needs, the definite needs of these people versus meeting the desires of people that were in church and trying to keep them happy. And there was a definite break in our life, and God had to make that clear where we were supposed to go next.
Just make me smile. I'm sitting there watching him talk about this stuff. I'm like, Brett, man, there's no doubt in my mind what's going on right now. And there's no doubt in my mind that this is something that God wants.
Trash Mountain began not because of an idea, or that we wanted to start a movement, or even because it seemed like the right thing to do. It began because God insisted. And when He insists on something, it's going to happen. We don't make this kind of claim based on a hunch or that it sure seemed like we were watching Him move. I say it because we have seen Him move. He has moved in the hearts of people, churches, schools, and businesses. And He moved in ways that we can't explain with science or human understanding. It has honestly been like watching a construction crew build a home. You can see all of the preliminary engineering and planning. The foundation is built, walls are erected, support beams are put in place, and you realize that all of that had to be done to move on to the next floor. You see, God doesn't just toss things together in a pile and hope that something beautiful comes out of it. He has order and purpose in all things, and He has ordered the path of this ministry. Tonight is not about the stories of what we have done, but it's about the ongoing story of what He is doing. What you see, what you hear, what you feel, let it be known that this is His story, and it is unfolding in the most unlikely of places.
Today our guest is Dr. Cara Powell. Cara is the Executive Director of the Youth Fuller Institute and a faculty member at Fuller Theological Seminary. As a youth ministry veteran of over 20 years, she serves as an advisor to youth specialties, named by Christianity Today as one of 50 women you should know. Cara is the author or co-author of a number of books, including Sticky Faith, Essential Leadership, Deep Justice Journeys, Deep Justice in a Broken World, Deep Ministry in a Shallow World, and the Good Sex Youth Ministry Curriculum. And today we want to interview her about her book, Sticky Faith. Cara, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here with you. And one thing that's not on my bio is probably my all-time favorite television show is West Wing.
Oh,
So kudos to you who just watched all the episodes. It's the only series that I own all the DVDs for. My husband gave it to me as a birthday gift. So I love that show.
The only problem with that show is that all the people that were going into politics who were in their 20s and watched The West Wing, they thought that's what it was actually like. And so
Right.
is it any wonder that politics in Washington has come to a screeching halt since The West Wing?
Right. Yeah, they end up pretty disillusioned when it's not quite like the television show.
Right.
So,
all right.
What is it? Bartlett 2016, right?
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Well, and that's our interview with Cara Powell today.
with you guys. Thanks so much.
All right, Cara, why don't we begin just jumping in the interview here, and let's talk about the main concern that drives this book.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. The best research done by a host of other studies indicates that almost half of kids from great churches like those of your listeners and watchers and great families drift from God and the church after they graduate from high school. Almost half, somewhere between 40 and 50%. So just imagine the young people that you care about in your family and in your church, and imagine taking a picture of them and then getting a red pen and putting an X across 50% of their faces, because that many will drift from their faith after graduation. And as a mom and a leader and a follower of Jesus, I'm not satisfied with that. And I'm guessing your listeners and watchers aren't either. And so that's why our team at the Fuller Youth Institute received a grant from the Lilly Endowment that allowed
All right,
All right,
slight
here.
connection problem.
We're going to go ahead and just call back here. We had, during our promo video of Trash Mountain, we also lost Cara, so we'll just call her back here and see if we can keep it rolling. We're not quite sure.
All right, Cara, I think we've got you back.
Yeah.
We dropped you there again for a second. I'm going to switch off our video feed to you, so that'll save us a little bandwidth, and hopefully the connection will stay solid. Go ahead, Tony. Let's try to pick up where we left off.
Yeah, you were talking to us about the Lilly Foundation. Ah. There we are. She's there.
Okay, here we go.
We apologize. When we left off, Cara, you were talking about the Lilly Foundation.
Yeah, the Lilly Endowment gave us a grant that allowed us to study over 500 youth group graduates during their first 3 years in college to try to figure out what leaders and parents and grandparents could do to give young people a faith that lasts, or what we at the Fuller Youth Institute call sticky faith.
Yeah, it's interesting. Probably about 2-3 months ago, we had someone in our chat room, and we were talking about this thing of half of young people are leaving the church, and we were really fixating on that, and a question was asked in the chat room, well, what about those who don't leave? And really, that's what your study was. I mean, you instead of focusing on those that left, you were looking at those that stayed. Am I right on that?
Yeah, to a large degree. I mean, we did follow all sorts of youth group kids. So it wasn't just those who stuck, but probably the majority were those who stuck. And that's why, we have a lot to celebrate. That's why we call it sticky faith, because we did learn a lot of the good practices that families and churches are already doing, and what those of us who are parents and leaders can learn from those good practices.
Yeah. Cara, this book rocked me because I was a youth pastor for 13 years. I tell everybody if I had a time machine, I would go back and change a lot of the things that I did. I wouldn't get as bent out of shape on Wednesday afternoons trying to come up with a game. But explain to our listeners, what do you mean by sticky faith as you define it in the first chapter of the book?
Yeah, good question. And it took our research team here at Fuller Seminary of faculty and seminary students, many of whom were past or present youth leaders, as I myself am. It took us several hours to try to figure out, what do we mean by faith? What do we mean by long-term faith? And then, quite honestly, how do we measure it? That's probably the hardest step. And so we came up with a number of qualities. We said that it was something that was personal, that the individual held to, but it was also something that was expressed in community. So we looked both at the individual's attitudes as well as their participation in faith community. We also felt like it was something that was both internal as well as external. So both internal about our heart and our character, but then also external that it should be reflected in behaviors. So, we tried to look at faith in a number of different and fairly nuanced ways so that we could have a good holistic composite understanding of long-term faith.
One of the things that was a bit disconcerting about your research was the degree to which kids who are being raised in the church are yet unable to define Christianity. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that was one of the biggest surprises for us is at the end of the 3-year study, so these were students, all of whom were youth group graduates, third year of college, we asked them this simple question, how would you define being a Christian? What does it mean to be a Christian? And, to be honest, I didn't think we were going to learn very much from that study, but that question, but a Fuller student suggested we include it. So I thought, okay, we won't lose that much by including it. I was very wrong because we learned quite a bit. Of the students who responded to that question, how would you define a Christian? 1/3 didn't mention Jesus in their answer.
Wow.
When I share that, I'm glad you said wow, because when I share that to leaders and parents, that's normally the response. Wow, 1/3 of our youth group graduates aren't mentioning Jesus in their description of what it means to be a Christian. What was their dominant answer? It means to love other people. Now, Jesus certainly wants us to love other people, but what we've seen young people do is truncate the power of the gospel to just a list of behaviors, a list of do's and don'ts. What Dallas Willard calls the gospel of sin management. And I'll tell you, if our faith is only a list of do's and don'ts, then no wonder young people are drifting from it.
Yeah, in the book Soul Searching, Smith and Denton, we actually have had Melinda Denton on the show, and I've had she's at Clemson University, so she's 20 minutes from us, and so
nice.
we've met a few times to talk. And one of the theories that they spun out of that book, which I found was fascinating, was moralistic therapeutic deism. And I'm wondering if, I know that you're familiar with some of their research, this whole love thing, it seems to kind of flow into their theory that this, again, this therapeutic, this moralistic therapeutic deism.
Yeah, we certainly saw that also, especially that first word, moralistic, where young people are equating the faith to basically being a good person, being nice, being caring, not hurting other people, etc. And, that's certainly part of what Jesus invites us to. But what separates Christianity from every other religion, what separates Christianity is grace. And what we saw with our young people in the study is that they had lost sight of grace. One of the ways we describe it is they tend to equate faith with a list of behaviors, kind of like a jacket, something external to them. And so when they fail to live up to those behaviors, they end up throwing that Jesus jacket in the corner. And then they feel guilty about what they've done, and they don't know how to pick up that jacket. And more importantly, they don't realize that faith is so much more than a jacket. So part of what we're inviting people to think about, and this has changed my parenting, is to really understand that grace is the heart of our faith. And we need to think about how young people can really lean into that grace instead of just leaning into behaviors.
Yeah.
Can I put you on the spot real quick? Because do you think that the students that you interviewed, they don't mention Christ, they don't really talk about grace, it's a list of do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
We're here in the Bible Belt, the birthplace, not the birthplace of the church boss, but certainly where they, thrived. So my question is this: is this something that's been passed down from generation to generation? Because many times the primary lay leader in the church was someone who kept the rules but didn't love their pastor. Maybe didn't even love their brother. I mean, their actual physical brother in the church. I've heard of stories where, brothers sat on their families sat on opposite sides. I'm just saying, do you think this is something, this just didn't happen overnight? This is what we've passed down to these kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And this would be one of the many areas where our research aligns well with Chris Smith and others, that, it's not like 16-year-olds get together at coffee houses and decide, hey, this is how we want to approach our faith. This is something that they have sadly seen modeled and had taught to them by well-intentioned parents and leaders. But, let me talk to leaders for a moment. In our effort to offer, kind of practical teaching to young people, we tend to focus on the parts of Scripture that are all about what we're supposed to do and forget that all that is grounded in grace. If you read Paul's epistles, they follow this progression where the early chapters talk about grace and the latter chapters is where the imperatives or the commands are. And our problem as teachers and leaders is we love teaching those latter chapters, the commands, the imperatives, without realizing that Paul's readers, and thus we and our students, need to first marinate in that grace in the early part of the chapters.
You referred to Christian Smith and Melinda Denton's research again here. My mind was tracking with yours. It kind of opens the door here also that I wanted to work into this interview. What was so encouraging about your research is it seems to, again, mirror Smith and Denton in the importance of parents and the role that they play. I mean, they really come out number one, don't they?
And the best research consistently shows that is that parents are the most dominant force in a young person's faith formation, which, my kids are 13, 11, and 7. And so that both encourages me and terrifies me.
Yeah.
So it's like, yay. Oh, no.
Yeah.
That's so true that we as parents, we are so influential. And, one of the leaders that's been through our Sticky Faith cohort here, which is a year-long process we offer at Fuller for churches that really want to dive deep in our research, he was preaching to his congregation, and he said to the congregation, many of whom are parents, we can't out-teach what you teach at home. We're not that good.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Applaud.
Yeah, we as leaders, we don't have the time that you do, parents with students, and we can't out-teach what you teach at home. So one of the ways that we really try to equip parents is how to maximize and leverage those cracks of time you have with your kids. So, for instance, we've done some specific work at parent-child faith conversations, and this has been one of the things that's most changed my parenting. And let's say, Tony, that you are my kid. What our research suggests is it's a good thing for me to ask you questions about your faith, which a lot of parents tend to do. What our research suggests, what is as if not more important, is not just that I ask you questions about your faith, but that I share about my own faith too. And that is what parents are not doing. They are interviewing their kids or lecturing their kids, but not sharing organically about their faith.
Well, you even get in the book, you talk about just a real openness here, even to the point of you feel like it's okay for the parents and that they should share some of their own doubts in their faith journey.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that. One of the real surprises of our research is the role of doubt in building sticky faith. And what we've seen, first off, 70% of the students in our survey had significant doubts about the faith. And for those students, when they had the opportunity to express and explore their doubt, that was actually related to faith maturity. So in other words, let me say it more simply. It's not doubt in and of itself that's toxic. It's unexpressed and unexplored doubt that becomes toxic. So we actually have a curriculum that just came out last week called Can I Ask That? 8 tough questions about God, the Bible, and life. And I'll tell you, we're getting such great response to that curriculum geared for high school students because we want to give students a space to ask tough questions about homosexuality, women in leadership. Why would the Bible have so much violence in it? These are the questions that kids have. And if we don't give them the opportunity to have a safe conversation about those questions at church, they're going to have it someplace else. And I don't know about you, but I would rather them have it at church or in their family.
Yeah, just a couple of statements here. Number one, this whole thing of when you express that in your book, that it's okay for parents to talk about their doubt and to bring this up as a topic of conversation. My anecdotal experience is that goes against the conventional wisdom within the evangelical movement. And second, if we're playing that I'm your child, we need to talk about allowance.
Okay. Well, you're going to have to talk to your dad about that.
That's
allowance.
This is getting weird, guys. Let's move on.
So Cara, we've kind of identified the problem, and in the book, one of the ways you start, really what I would call breaking this curse that's been passed down, is you deal extensively with the importance of identity for our kids. So talk about where we should be focusing our effort as parents.
Yeah. Tim Clydesdale is a great sociologist in New Jersey, and he talks about how young people have tended to put their faith in an identity lockbox. They take what's important to them and they kind of lock it away. And the good news is it shows that it's important to them because they've locked it up. It's something special to them. But the bad news is it's not something that's kind of integrating their daily life. It's not central to them. So one of the ways that we really encourage young people to understand what it means to have their identity grounded in Jesus is to expose those young people to other amazing adults who are a step or maybe 20 steps ahead in this journey. We actually tried to identify what youth group participation variable is the most significant when it comes to long-term faith. And, you'll be glad to know that service and justice is related to mature faith. Studying scripture is related to mature faith. Being involved in student leadership is related to mature faith. But of everything we looked at, the variable that was most correlated to mature faith was actually intergenerational worship and relationships.
Yeah. Well,
having young people involved in the overall life of the church. So we feel like core to a young person's understanding of identity and the church is that, this is a no duh, but that they actually are part of the church, not just part of a great thriving youth group that meets across the parking lot.
Yeah, that goes into my question here, and it's like a bomb in the book. It's a boom when you get to it. In chapter 5 on sticky relationships, you talk about the way we divide ministries in the church. And so I want to read a quote here. You say, but one of my mantras is that balance is something we swing through on our way to a other extreme. Yeah. I'm afraid that's what's happened here. In an effort to offer relevant and developmentally appropriate teaching and fellowship for children and teenagers, we have segregated. And I use that verb intentionally but not lightly. We have segregated kids from the rest of the church, and that segregation is causing kids to shelve their faith. So first, why do you say that? Kind of get into some of your research here. And second, you do a lot in the book to talk about how we can begin to kind of break that. So maybe just address both those.
Yeah, for sure. We talked to youth group graduates about what was challenging about their transition to college. And the first couple things were friendship, aloneness, things that were related to social, maybe not surprising. Item number 3, in terms of what's challenging when it comes to transitioning to college, is finding a church. And that's because the typical youth group graduate, they know youth group, but they don't know church. Yeah. They've been on a great short-term mission trip with their youth pastor, but they haven't been on an overall church mission trip. So probably of all of our research findings, the one that seems to have caught the attention the most of churches is that we need to make sure that we help 16 and 46 and 86-year-olds share life and be rubbing shoulders with each other. So one of the ways that we like to operationalize this is actually a quote from my good friend and colleague, Chap Clark here at Fuller Seminary, who talks about that we need to reverse the 5-to-1 ratio. And what do I mean by that? In the typical church, you've got a retreat coming up or starting small groups, and you're thinking, okay, we want one adult for every 5 kids. Well, what we're saying out of our research is let's reverse that and have 5 adults investing in each kid. And we're not talking about 5 small group leaders. Your listeners don't have to feel like, oh gosh, I'm having a hard enough with one adult, and now I need to get 5 for each kid. Yeah. No, not 5 small group leaders, but 5 adults who show up at a soccer game, who know a kid's name, who are praying for that kid, who that family knows they can turn to. So, that's one of the things that really practically we're inviting churches and families to think about is how can you surround each kid with a team of 5 adults?
But Cara, that's what we pay the youth pastor to do. We pay the youth pastor to go to all the sport events, and I did a blog post about that. Like I said, a couple of things, and I had a parent one time, their child had gone away to college, and even while they were in youth group, they didn't attend regularly. And I remember about halfway through his freshman year, I get a call from his mom, and she just lets me have it. And she says, I can't believe you. I said, what are you talking about? She's like, he's not going to church anywhere. He's about to flunk out. All he does is play video games and watch football. I said, well, what churches, when you visited, because he was about several hours away. I said, well, when you took him down to visit the school, what churches did you introduce him to? And she's like, what? I was like, well, so when you just sent him to school, you didn't talk to him about church attendance, and you didn't help him find a church. And so I started every year when kids would graduate, I was hard on their parents. And I said, if your kid goes away to college and you don't visit a church with them, just pretty much know they're not going to go to church.
Right. Wow. Yeah. I think there's certainly some truth to that. That's not an exact correlation in the research, but yeah, out of our data, we are saying to families and to pastors, how can you make sure that kids know what it's like to show up at a new church? I know one youth pastor who got permission from a senior pastor that after the seniors graduated from high school in May or June, the next 3 Sundays took them to 3 different churches. And it wasn't so that they could church hop. It was just simply he wanted them to have the experience of showing up at a new church.
Yeah.
So ideally, like you well said, it's where they're going to go to college or military workforce. But if, sometimes that's not feasible. And so how can you kind of facsimilate the experience locally by just visiting different churches and evaluating and what did you like, what did you not like, and just get that experience of showing up in a new worshiping community.
The next question is one that you ask and answer in the book, and it's, how can we plant a vision for kingdom service so deeply in our kids that they can't help but offer love and hope to those in need?
Yeah, great question. Boy, we could talk hours about that alone. But I'll try to be condensed. The good news is that young people do have an interest in serving and being involved in helping those who are poor. We saw that on our research, and I think if anybody just looks around in our culture, there's so many teenagers and young adults doing exciting kingdom ministry, and that's something to celebrate. The bad news is that the best research indicates that while students may take forays into service, it doesn't tend to have long-term results in their lives. It's kind of, you do a short-term mission trip, you get involved feeding those who are homeless, and it's kind of 3 steps forward, but then you get back to life as normal, and it's 2.93 steps back.
Cara, can I interrupt you here? I was really surprised when I read that. I was shocked by that because, again, let's just talk conventional wisdom in the evangelical movement specifically. That is not what we've been operating under. What we've been saying is get them there. It'll just change their life forever.
Yeah, if you send them, they will grow kind of mentality. Yes, and, I don't know a bigger fan of short-term missions than me. I met my husband on a short-term mission trip. We got engaged on a short-term. I love short-term missions. So I'm not saying we need to not do it. I'm just saying we need to do it better. And one of the ways that we've seen out of our research and others is instead of viewing it as, a 3-day trip or a 1-week trip, how can we view it as a 3-month process or a 7-month process where there's preparation done before, good reflection done during, and probably the most important is strategic debrief afterwards. So young people and quite honestly adults learn how to connect the dots between what they experienced in Guatemala and that person who sits next to them in physics who doesn't have any friends. They need our help to connect those dots. So that would be one thing that is important in service, is just viewing it more as a process. The second that I want to highlight, just because I know there are parents listening and watching, as well as leaders who work with parents, is there's some really good research done by us, as well as Diana Garland out of Baylor, showing the importance of families serving together. So often in a family, and this can be very true of the Powell family, this is a struggle for us. I serve in certain ways. My husband chairs our deacon board. He serves in certain ways. Our kids serve in certain ways. So, one of our goals for 2014 is that the Powell family would serve together every month, once. Because we're serving, but we're in different rooms or sometimes different states when we serve. So that's another way that families can try to build more sticky faith, is to have those service experiences and then be able to talk about them before, during, and after with their kids.
One thing that I love about the Wesleyan denomination, and I think this is a kind of a new thing, is we've implemented this thing called student membership, which is for kids 16 and under, that if they've made a profession of faith and if they've been baptized, they can be a member of the church. And so we're redoing our membership, and every kid that becomes a member, they have to have an adult sponsor. And so ideally that would be a parent, but if their parents don't come to church, someone else in the church with this kid's parents' permission, hopefully, becomes their sponsor. And as they're growing to age 16, showing them, hey, this is how you serve in the ministry. This is why we take up an offering every week. And so we're just kind of rethinking all of that and hoping to use, you said having 5 adults for every kid. Well, if you've got a list and you've got kids that are actually members and you've got a good responsibility list, it's a lot easier to do that. And I'm excited about what God's going to do through that.
That's great. We've seen churches use confirmation or dedication or baptism or membership, like you're talking about, whatever kind of rituals there are or turning points. That's a wonderful opportunity to recruit and celebrate the mentors who are in a kid's life. Just a quick story from last week. My son is contemplating getting baptized. And, we've talked about this 5-to-1 ratio a lot. And we did this whole birthday celebration when he turned 13 and he went out one-on-one with each of these 5 men, et cetera. So that was 6 months ago. And last week we're talking to him about being baptized. And I said to him, in addition to a pastor being involved, I just think it would be great if a parent was involved and maybe an adult that's important to you, which again, I don't know that I would have said it quite that way because of before our research, but Nathan said to me, well, gosh, Mom, I don't know which of the 5 men I should ask to be involved. And so, that's his quandary is he has these 5 men and which one should he invite? And so, I just love that he's thinking about these 5 men as his team.
One of the things that kind of broke my heart as I was reading this book is I was glad that parents play such a key role, but then in the back of my mind, there's this question that just always haunts me. What about kids whose parents are not grounded in the church at all?
Yep. Great question. And I'm glad you asked that. We definitely need to talk about that. I mean, first, I want to celebrate that those young people are even involved in a church. So let's celebrate that. This is where, quite honestly, 5-to-1 becomes all the more important. And, I was speaking to youth pastors this past weekend, and I said, your job is ideally you mobilize parents to think about who are connected with the church, to think about that team of adults for their kids, and ideally parents view themselves as the quarterback for those kids. And then for those kids that don't have parents who will be that quarterback, that's where you as a youth leader step in and think about, what up to 5, even if it's just 1 or 2, that's a victory. There's nothing incredibly magical about the number 5. But, what 1, 2, 5 adults can I help this kid connect with? So, what I would say is when parents aren't engaged, that's where intergenerational relationships are all the more important than sticky faith.
Cara, in the last chapter, there's a quote that I'm probably going to print out and put on my mirror that I'll see every morning. And it is, when our kids falter or rebel, we need to not allow their current attitudes, behavior, or rhetoric to sway us from the course of loving and being there for them consistently.
Yeah.
So what does that look like through the teen years?
Yeah. Oh, well, I can tell you in a few sentences because it's so easy. One of our next books that's coming out this August is called The Sticky Faith Guide for Your Family. And what we did is we interviewed 50 amazing families who were successful at building sticky faith and tried to learn from them. One of the quotes that stands out the most to me in these 50 hours of interviews we did was one dad who said, what my wife and I have learned is as long as we have relationship, we have influence.
Yeah, wow.
As long as we have relationship, we have influence. And so, I am all for discipline. I definitely am. You ask my kids, they will tell you. But how we can have that sense of grace and affection and relationship in the midst of the discipline. I mean, it's both an art and a science, but that's one of the goals that I'm striving for myself as a parent.
I had the thought when I finished this book that, and I don't mean to reduce this book, please forgive me here, but we had an interview 3 months ago with a guy named Dave Jury, and it's a book, the title is Being Dad, and it's very anecdotal. It's just about what his father did with him growing up and how his faith, use your language, how his faith stuck.
Yeah.
And I saw a parallel here because I had this one book that was about one person's story. Then I see your research, but what kept coming up to me was intentionality in parenting and the level of engagement that calls for. I mean, I'm not being too simplistic here, am I?
No, you've actually chosen probably one of my favorite words of all time. My friends make fun of me for how much I say the word intentional or intentionality. And I do think, I'm intentional to a fault, to be honest. But I do think that in the midst of the busyness of parenting, and believe me, I am there. If you had taken a snapshot of our family getting out of the house into the minivan this morning, it wasn't exactly sweetness and light. So I sure understand that. But, I'll tell you what, I just made a note before this interview that I want to take my son out. I have a half an hour with him on Thursday, just him, not the girls. And I thought, I'm going to take Nathan out for a treat because I want to just touch base with him, find out how he's doing in track. And, so in the midst of the hecticness of getting kids to soccer and music and scouts and hockey and all that life and homework. I mean, believe me, I am living that.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that we find those moments, that 5 minutes, that hour where we can just somehow connect with our kid? Because again, as long as we have relationship, we have influence.
That's good.
My son came up to me probably about 30 minutes after I'd been asking him to get in the bed, and he's 7, and he comes up to me in the kitchen, and he says, Dad, I want to spend some time with you. I said, okay, well, he said, no, Dad, right now, I love you, and I want to spend time with you. And I was like, there was part of my brain thinking, you better get in the bed right now. And there was part of my, is he trying to trick me? Is this all a ploy? But yeah, I mean, I think we waste so much time in the car, either listening to the radio. And I was in the car one time and with one of my kids, and we rode for 30 minutes in silence. And I felt so convicted about that. And like I said, this book has just challenged my thinking on a lot of that.
Well, Cara, talk about some of the research you're doing now, and then tell our listeners and viewers about stickyfaith.org.
Maybe just a second. It looks like Skype is reconnecting again.
We love Skype. That in the absence of anything else, it's a great technology.
Yeah, and the one week where we don't preface everything with our guests saying Skype may flake out. Sometimes it has been known to do this. That's the week that it goes nuts.
Right, yeah.
All right, we're back. So
yeah.
repeat your question there, Tony.
Yeah, Cara, I just wanted you, before we let you go, tell our listeners what you're working on right now, and also talk about stickyfaith.org.
Yeah, you bet. We just have this fantastic team here at the Fuller Youth Institute, and our mission is to equip young people with the lifelong faith that they need. So for folks who want to get more resources, find out more about our books or free resources, they can go to stickyfaith.org. Parents, grandparents, leaders of all stripes and flavors, check out stickyfaith.org.
All right. Cara, thanks so much for taking time out of what we know is a very busy schedule.
My pleasure. Hey, any fans of West Wing, I'll talk to anytime.
Yes.
Well, in fact, I was trying to get Heath to end the interview by saying we want to thank White House Press Secretary C.J. Craig for joining us on the show. There is a bit of a resemblance there. I'm just going to throw it out.
About once a month, when I'm done speaking somebody come up to me and say, have you ever seen the show West Wing? What's coming next? And I take that as a huge compliment. I think C.J. Craig rocks. Yeah.
Yeah. She's a lot better than those jokers in real life, for sure.
Exactly. All right. Blessings, y'all. Thanks for your great work.
Blessings on you too. Bye-bye.
Hey, we want to remind you, this book that we have been raving about all morning, Sticky Faith, you can win a copy. techalo.gy/giveaway or the technologyshow.com/giveaway. I cannot. Our church is after reading this book, we're gonna be intentional.
Yeah. So this is one of those books where really you as a pastor, I don't care how busy you are, in the next few weeks, acquaint yourself with the book, acquaint yourself with the research, and then get this in the hands of the people who work with your youth.
And children.
And children.
I mean, by youth, we're just saying,
youth and children.
Anyone under 30.
Again, the big bomb in this book, the big explosion, is when she talks about how we've segregated ministries. And, now, this is causing.
Yeah.
This is causing our kids to walk
can I have
away.
an observation? I wasn't able to jump in, but I know of a situation where a youth group was growing, and it was growing due to children outside of the church. Mm-hmm. And it was rough, and it was difficult. And a family pulled out of the church because they didn't want their kids to be influenced by
those other kids.
The other kids.
One night a week, yeah.
And it's breaking my heart because the proper response as the parent would have been to jump into volunteer service alongside your kid in that group. And rather than have that as your fear, you begin to serve as the influence on the life of... Yeah. And...
Oh yeah,
I mean, I've come back to that story.
Yeah,
and the research says is it doesn't. At the end of the day, it's not going to matter what these other ones who are coming in on Wednesday night. It doesn't matter what their influence is going to be, because it's probably not going to be they're not going to be able to overcome the influence that you are. On
and it broke my heart because it's the wrong attitude. Number one, it's just absolutely there's nothing right about that in any way, shape, or form. But after not only reading this book,
but reading the book of Acts in the Community Bible Experience, I was told and encouraged as a youth pastor, well, you don't want to use parents as youth sponsors. That's just not cool. The kids aren't going to like that. I'm telling you, if I could go back,
yeah.
I would change that philosophy. And I would say, listen, I'm not looking for you to necessarily influence your kid, but there's these other kids.
So let me run to your defense,
yeah.
and that is to say this. At the time, Heath, we were going to seminars and church growth conferences, and they were telling us we needed to segregate everyone and from a developmental point of view, get kids and youth into there. And so this is what we were being told is to segregate.
How was all of that happening at the same time that Jim Dobson and Focus on the Family was making such a big family push outside the church?
I don't know. Great
and the
question.
importance of family. Because that's the same era, right? I mean, we're talking about the same period of time. And I'm not saying that there was something definitely correlating there, but it seems like at the time that they're making this push for family's important and outside the church, like the family's got to stick together. Inside the church, we're saying, let's break apart the family and do this. What in the world?
Yeah, no, I don't know. That's a great question.
This book is not... correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, but this book is not saying don't have youth group, don't have children's ministry. We've had Matthew DePrez on here, author of Join Generations, and their church, Frontline in Michigan, has a thriving children and youth ministries. It's just that can't be the only thing.
I got the same impression out of this book that I did with Melinda Denton. Melinda says the same thing. We're not saying do away with kids ministries or youth ministries, but you remember Cara said in her interview that what they're trying to promote is 5-to-1. In other words, trying to find 5 adults that are going to intersect with your kid's life. 5 adults from the church.
Yeah.
Instead of everyone staying in separate groups, you got to have that give and take between the generations.
I mean, just as I'm sitting here thinking, one of the reasons we're redoing our membership role at our church is to create a congregational care list. And as I'm thinking to this, I think for me at my church, when an adult signs up to be a member, I'm not just going to say, hey, these are the ministries, we would like for you to pick one. But I would say, here's the list of kids in our church. Which one are you going to pray for daily?
Yeah.
Which one are you going
to... An intentionality where you literally assign people. I don't think that's a bad idea. I mean,
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah, way to go, Heath. After reading this book this past Sunday in church, I was so... My awareness was so heightened. So, I had already, before the amen, I had already picked out about 5 or 6 kids. It's like, hug them, get over, hey, how you doing? I get to drive the church van home after church. And so, to me, that's one of my fun times because I engage those kids. Hey, And
let me just pat you on the back. I get to.
Yeah.
Man, I love that language.
Yeah.
It's not I have to.
I get to.
It's I get to. And we got to change the way we think about these kinds of things.
We do.
One. Oh, go ahead. Finish.
There's so much more to unpack here and talk about.
It's not a job. It's a service.
Yeah.
It's a ministry.
I have so much more personal anecdotes about this very thing, dealing with my own family, because my dad was the dirty, snotty-nosed little kid who was brought to church by a neighbor whose own parent did not have any foundation inside the church, and he only stuck because he had people investing directly into his life, and it wasn't the pastor.
Yeah.
Now the pastor played a huge part, and his youth pastor played a huge part, but it was a lay person in the church who treated him as though he was their child. And I have that person I owe my life and my existence literally to that individual making that investment.
Yeah. Think about this, and this came out of our conversation Sunday, again, Community Bible Experience, where we're reading about encounters with people who were saved, who'd been baptized, but they did not have the Holy Spirit. And so over and over in the book of Acts, you see people prayed for to receive the Holy Spirit. Now, we are a holiness denomination that believes in that there's a second work of grace, that there is an indwelling of the Holy Spirit where you fully submit. And I thought, we don't practice that. We do not. Like, there will be at some point, all three of my kids believe in Christ. They've trusted on him for salvation. I have baptized them. But there needs to come a time in their faith that I need to be intentional to pray for them to receive the fullness of the Holy Spirit.
Sure.
And we've not done that.
Yeah.
And I think that's got to be part of the process to helping them stick to somehow making that a memorable event. I'm telling you.
Yeah, right now I don't care about download or anything. Let's just keep talking here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I want to go back to what you said, Tej. I mean, your dad's story is one of he wasn't raised within Christianity. It was the church that reached out to him. Now, my story is that I always say that my dad kind of plucked me out of my situation. But as a kid, I went to the church. So it was a little holiness church. I'm not going to say what denomination here. And so keep in mind, this is the 70s, right? And so they came and picked us up on the church van. And this is, free love, Vietnam, drugs, rock and roll. And I was from a house where relationships were not stable. My mom had been divorced for a second time, and I'm not dogging my mom out. Everyone knows I love my mom dearly, and she has her own story and story of salvation. But I remember one Sunday morning, we were picked up on the church van, and the pastor's wife was in the van. And my sisters, who were in kindergarten, just got their ears pierced. And then my other sister, who's in second grade, got her ears pierced. So they were excited about it. So we hop on the church van. They're bragging about it. And the next 10 minutes was a conversation about why they should not have pierced their ears. And so now get this. This is my little fourth grade mind, 10-year-old mind. I didn't know where God stood on the whole sex and the war and in drugs. But I knew this, that the God of heaven was pretty tore up about earrings. Pretty tore up about it.
Yeah.
and this is my thing, that in the absence of real relationships with people, that was my exit out of the church.
Yeah.
Why did as a kid, there are things I didn't know, but why am I going to go to a place where no one really, they didn't express that they were excited to see me?
Yeah. And that you were of value to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that I was made to feel embarrassed.
Yeah.
About even being there because my sisters had pierced ears. That these kids are more than numbers. We have to, especially those that don't have parents in the church, we have got to build relationships with them.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I haven't beaten this drum from the pulpit in a little over a year because I felt like I was beating it too much. I actually had somebody inside the church at one point tell me, and I shouldn't let this influence me, but last summer say we give too much attention to children in this church. Those were the exact words. And yeah,
God help
but
us.
I think I'm about to pick up the drum again, and we'll beat it a few times Sunday morning.
But here's the thing. So now what you do, Matthew, and I would say this to anyone that's listening, is that these aren't our ideas. The reason we're talking about this is it comes right out of the research that we see in this book, Sticky Faith, and that what they're talking about best practices, and so what they're encouraging. What are they encouraging for a practice? 5 adults.
Yeah.
To every one child, feeding into that child.
Yeah. Wow.
That's convicting. It's Herculean. But to say
because what that literally means, let's turn that statistic around. I mean, in a church, that means, like in a church our size, where we've got a pretty good little group of kids. I mean, we've got a nursery of 1 to 3 year olds where there's 7 to 10 of them every Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Then we've got groups of others all the way up to teens. That means in a church our size, that means every adult's, there's going to be more than one kid that they're going to be intentional about.
I already told you I went to church very intentional this past Sunday and I was overwhelmed as I looked around the congregation to think, okay, if that kid's going to make it, they need to know me, they need to know this other guy, they need to know that one. We need to be playing a better. And I would say this, that by and large, the churches that I'm familiar with aren't approaching ministry this way whatsoever.
No.
And many of our churches, wouldn't you say in our district, many are still operating under the segregated, kids, youth, and adults kind of a paradigm.
We've just gotten into a habit of that, and it's gonna take intentionality to get out of it.
It is.
And I think I don't think she's we have children's church. but the kids come in for the first 10 or 15 minutes, and
Yeah.
they experience some of the music, and they experience part of the offering. And I'm just thinking here, I want to change. Why can't I want to involve kids in ministry? I don't want them just to be there. And let's be honest, like I've told
Oh, they
people,
talk about that in the book, involving kids and youth in the service itself.
and I've told them, and we have some teens that lead on the worship team, but I've told people in our church, listen, you're the parent of your child. If you got a baby, you know, if your kid starts making noise, if you want your kid to stay in service with you, that's great. You know, if they don't want to go to children's church, that's great. They stay in here. You got a baby. I'm telling you, I don't care. I don't mind having. I'd rather have a crying baby in my service than not have any babies in our. And a lot of people are like, why don't they take that baby? That baby's being distracted. I'm like, no, that baby's being a baby. You know, I'm telling you, it's rocking my world reading the New Testament. They didn't have, like, when you gather together.
This is the first time he's ever read it, man.
Things pastors should never say.
I would tell you, if you're a pastor and you haven't read the New Testament, I strongly
Encourage
as strongly as we're encouraging you to read anything Cara Powell has written.
So let me say this. One of the things that this is nice because I don't have to manufacture anything. I like the way that we do this at Golden Grove, and that is every other Sunday the kids are in with us, the adults.
Yeah.
I love that. I totally support it. I think it's the way to go because they need that interaction with us. They need to be in big people church, if you will.
Yeah, but let me just speak anecdotal evidence. Like, we're still not doing as well as we need to on that front, because I can tell you that that our children, they're not as excited about it as we are. I know that. Like, it's not seen by them as this is exciting. I mean, not that it has to be an exciting production. Churches, there's going to be, I shouldn't use that word, but they're not looking forward to the thought of that Sunday over the other. What can I do to?
Those get in developmental things, and
I don't know that I'll ever get that to where it's like, yes, we're staying in the sanctuary, but we can certainly do some things better as people to make that Sunday more influential in their life. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Well, in the 2,000 years of the church, it's only been the last 30 years that we've segregated the ministries of the church.
Yeah. And in doing that, I did a blog post about this. When we did that, it's that generation that 80% have left the church.
Well,
you know what I mean?
But the research in here, I mean, they're saying 50%.
I'm telling you.
I'm going with that because it's research.
You know, I used to think that about halfway through my 10 years as a youth pastor, I used to think that it was I looked at it as a student's participation in activities and youth camp and youth conventions and their consistency in that and mission trips. And that does play a huge role in it. But as I look, and this is not I wish this was 100%. But there's a young man commenting in the chat room today in the conversation, thanking me. I mean, I'm over here about to break down, crying, thanking me for my ministry. He had great parents.
Yeah.
And most of the time when that was the case, and I think maybe I got a little bit big for my britches, thinking, man, look what I'm doing. I didn't realize. Now, are there kids that have fallen away from the faith who had wonderful parents, who were wonderful Christians? Yeah.
Yeah, they talk about that in the book. All right, let's wrap this thing up. So talk about our guests next week. Heath, Bogears.
Oh, Jim and Geraldine Bogear, authors of Faith Legacy and Faith Legacy for Couples. Two great books. Faith Legacy deals right in. I mean, what a good sequel to today's conversation, because it's all about, they do well, I don't want to give it all away because I want you to watch next week, but a perfect segue into what we're going to be talking about next week.
March the 25th, we'll have Dr. Matthew Sleeth with us. He is the author of the book 24/6. He's a medical doctor and is going to talk about the importance of Sabbath in our lives. If you want to do further research on anything we discussed today, particularly the book.
Yeah.
Well, only the book, let's be honest. The book.
We just encourage you to go ahead and get the book and share it with your ministry staff. If you want to contact us via email, you can do that at thetechnologyshow@gmail.com. Send your questions there. Also, if you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can go to 3049 Theology. That's 304-986-5649. Leave us a message. We may even play your comments on the air. As always, thank you for joining us. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Have a great day.
Great day.
I love it. We cycle through a great list of things. How do you sign off the double drop kick show, Heath? Give us the double drop kick sign
Okay,
off.
so the way that wrestling used to go off every week when I was a kid was it would always end with everybody's running to the ring and it just all heck's breaking loose. And so you're just now getting into it, and the announcer says, "All right, fans, that's all the time we got for this week. We'll see you next time." It was just like, no, don't turn it off now.
Okay, so go ahead.
All right, fans, that's all the time we got for this week. We'll see you next week, same time.